Well, welcome into Bayou Roar on this episode. We are going to be recapping LSU's loss to Alabama on the road and then talking about everything else that happened in week 11 of college football. But of course, we got to start with the 20-9 loss to the Alabama Crimson Tide in Tuscaloosa on Saturday night. And of course, I think the first thing that we got to get out of the way is this. Is this a surprising loss for LSU? No. For one, obviously, the way the season has gone just in general, yeah, you shouldn't be surprised that LSU lost to an Alabama team that is, in the top five and are competing for one of the top spots for the college football playoff, all those good things. Like, no. Given everything that's going on at LSU right now, definitely not surprising that you went in there on Saturday night and dropped this one. But this was also a game for me personally that I picked LSU to lose even in the preseason. I thought going on the road for what should have been a night game in Bryant Denny, even if LSU had, a much better year, was going to be difficult. And I had hoped that by the time the game actually got, around, that maybe LSU would be in a position where they could go out and win it. But obviously, just the way everything kind of fell off the wagon the way it did, no, I'm not personally surprised at all that LSU went in and dropped this one. However, I think the reason why this loss still feels so deflating, even though it shouldn't come as a surprise at all, is the fact that you actually did have an opportunity to compete and potentially even win this one on Saturday because your defense put up one heck of a fight. And we're going to definitely talk about that. But it's just offensively, once again, you just could not get anything done. And that is what quickly unraveled everything. And so we'll take a look at the offense and the defense and just talk about what they did right, wrong, all those good things. But where the conversation I think needs to start is with coaching. Because obviously this was Frank Wilson and kind of not a new staff, obviously, but you fired Joe Sloan as well. So this was your first game with Frank Wilson at the helm where you had, Avery Atkins calling the play, or Alex Atkins, sorry. Avery Atkins used to be a kicker for LSU. Alex Atkins calling the plays for you on Saturday. First time that was, you know, a thing. And obviously there's always going to be a learning curve. And man, what a heck of a game to be coaching your first interim game at, going on the road to Tuscaloosa trying to do that. So, did Frank Wilson and company fail LSU on Saturday? I would not necessarily say that they failed. I think, given all of the circumstances, they did the best they could. Was it a perfect game by them? No, not at all. There was definitely still some issues that have persisted all year long. But I think overall, you got them prepared just about as best as you could, and you put up a fight for 4 quarters, and you did what you could. And I can't blame them at all for how how this one ended up turning out. So I'm not trying to just, sugarcoat everything. If I thought Frank Wilson just absolutely, you know, failed you as a coach on Saturday, I would say it. But the thing is since he is the interim, I can't really, put too much grief on him. Because I mean, there's a reason why he's an interim coach and not the full-time coach. And for all the people saying, well, what if Frank runs the table and he gets a shot at the head coaching job? I think that puts all that noise to bed as well now, knowing that your first real opportunity you still lost and the same problems still exist. I think quickly shows why, as much as they love Frank Wilson, as much as the players like him and all that stuff, you just need somebody new to come in and reset the culture for this team because it's absolutely just at about the bottom of the barrel as you can be. So, all that being said, I thought coaching was fine. Just some things to definitely work on and improve upon moving forward, but they did the best that they could. Now, we're going to head into talking about the offense because the thing is, though, one of the biggest coaching issues that I still felt like was present was inconsistent, play calling. And look, some people like to roast when fans are like, hey, why are we running these play calls and stuff like that? Going, well, you don't know what was called and all that and yada, yada, yada. There's been several podcasts and media people that I've heard say that kind of notion. And all I'll say is this. I mean, what are you watching that makes you think that we don't understand what they're calling when we keep seeing wide receiver screens being called almost every other play? I mean, that's the confusing part to me is like, what do you mean we don't know what's actually being called? Like, what's out there on the field looks like what's being called. And look, they may just not be executing it right. That's definitely something that maybe is the part of the problem. They're not being coached correctly on how to execute the screens in a proper way. But the problem is, I mean, these screens are not working. And we're seeing that, and yet they're still being dialed up. And that's the problem I'm having. It's like, we'll have these couple play calls where it's like, okay, that was great. Like they added this little wrinkle where they would move Garrett. They would kind of move Garrett to his right, kind of let him roll out, and they would basically be protecting the offensive line because the offensive line doesn't have to sit still, and try to straight up pass block the whole time. Garrett's rolling out to his right. He's moving. The receivers are moving with him, gives him a chance to dial up a throw. Those were probably the best throws Garrett Nussmeier made all night on those rollout calls because, again, that's how it's designed. You're going to be rolling out. You can prepare yourself mentally for that. And again, the pressure is not necessarily right in your face because your pass block isn't breaking down because your offensive line's a little bit more protected. I loved those types of play calls. Now, I did even say to myself, we can't keep running these over and over and over again because eventually the defense is going to catch on. But the couple of times that they did run those plays, that was a very nice wrinkle and it worked. But again, it was kind of overshadowed by the amount of times that you just, again, continue to make really poor decisions by calling a lot of screens. And so, with that being said, it was just a very disappointing night still to see that coaching continue to happen, that play calling continue to happen, even with a new play caller at the helm. It was just disappointing. But this offense, for the most part, the good things that I can say, Harlem Berry is still continuing to impress. He had 12 carries for 66 yards. And I know that that might not be overly impressive, but for 5.5 yard average, he had a long run of 37. I mean, he basically dominated on Saturday night with the bulk of the carries. He had 12. Caden Durham had 3. Jawan Johnson had 1. Michael Van Buren is your next leading ball carrier with 6 rushing attempts. Like, you know, when your quarterback, your backup quarterback at that, has 6 carries and your leading running back has 12. I mean, that's pretty telling that Barry is the guy that they trust the most. And again, I think Barry's just proven he's got this ability to be able to just go with the flow of the game. Caden Durham, I think, has all the talent in the world. It's just for some reason his vision isn't quite to the level where he can just go, oh, look, there's a gap. Let's go. It's like he is really hoping that the blocks are going to develop for him and open up the path and make it so obvious that he can cut through it. Again, we've seen his physical ability shine multiple times. We know he's got all the tools, but Barry just seems to be able to have a quicker decision making process where he goes, yeah, here's a little bit of a gap. Let me just try to hit it. And then it's working out, even if it's not for a 37-yard run. Every time he's at least picking up 2, 3, 4 yards on each carry, like it's pretty impressive that he's doing that as a true freshman. So Harlem Berry, I still think, is just as impressive as ever. Xavion Thomas had 5 for 49. Barryon Brown had 5 for 44. Good to see them kind of getting involved and having some decent games. Aaron Anderson had 4 for 16, which Aaron Anderson also got hurt at one point with an elbow injury. So don't know if that kind of continued to limit him, but obviously they're continuing to try to give him the ball. But here's the biggest problem that I think LSU faced on Saturday outside of the screens. It feels like there's still this weird thing where they're still relying on players that have not proven that they are very trustworthy for multiple different reasons, too. Destin Hill keeps checking into the game for snaps, and like he hasn't recorded a catch, I don't think, like all season. Like he's obviously not a part of the offensive game plan. So it's like, why do you keep rotating Destin Hill into a game? This isn't college football 26 where, you're just trying to help him with his, you know, games played or something like that, or playing time. So you're just throwing him in there to get a couple snaps so he'll be happy. Like he's clearly not a part of your offensive game plan. So like, is he just a good run blocker or like what? Because I don't know why he continues to see the field and get snaps when he's not relied upon. Bauer Sharp, for a completely different reason, I don't think should be getting any touches anymore because Bauer Sharp caught a ball, got a gap, started running, and he lost the ball. Now, look, listen, it's one thing to say that, like, great job by the defender because he used the classic tried and true peanut punch to knock it out. Like, it's hard to kind of stop that sometimes when it's done effectively. But Bauer Sharp just has consistently done dumb things like this all season, even going back to game number one, where he fumbled the ball on like one of the first possessions of the Clemson game. Like it was just one of those things of like, we have seen this before from Bauer Sharp, and it's still continuing to persist. And you don't necessarily want to just blame that guy for all of the problems, but that was a huge momentum killer. Basically, that set them up for their one of their first field goals, if not their very first field goal. I can't remember at what point of the game that fumble came in, but your defense had been playing really well, and that set them up basically with the best field position to go ahead and get an automatic 3 points, no matter what happened on the next offensive possession. So it's just little things like that that continue to happen to where it's like, okay, why is then Bauer Sharp continuing to see the field? Jawan Johnson had 1 carry for 2 yards. I get it. You're trying to relieve some guys every now and again to get them some rest. Like, but Jawan Johnson has not been a very proven commodity for you. Like, you should really just kind of be, giving the ball to Durham and Barry as much as you can and kind of letting that be your two back system. You know, the Xavion Thomas wrinkle in the backfield. Now, look, Xavion Thomas should continue to go out there and play. I'm just saying, like, this wrinkle needs to stop, being called where he motions into the backfield and then they hand the ball off to him. It's not working anymore. Caught Clemson off guard a couple times, and that was cute. But over the next couple weeks, it just continued to happen, and then it was never effective again. That's got to stop. But it's just, we're still throwing in guys sometimes, and we're still throwing in plays even sometimes that like we just shouldn't be anymore. And that's why it's just really disappointing offensively. And of course, also, I mean, your offensive line, man, it just continues to struggle. Now, Carius Kern, playing left tackle, I think continues to be a thing that needs to happen because even if he's struggling a little bit, he's a true freshman with a lot of upside. I think he's going to be really good. I think he needs to continue to play and just try to get better each week. Ori Williams checked in for Weston Davis in the second half, and it not at all was perfect, but it was better than Weston Davis. And I think Ori Williams should continue to start at right tackle. Again, even if he's struggling a little bit. At this point of the year, you just got to empty everything out. You've got to turn over every stone that's out there. You cannot leave a single one unturned at this point. You've got to try everything possible to go out there and win and have a good end to the year. And so I think some of these guys that you've been depending upon all year, or sorry, Weston Davis, whoever's been playing left guard, it seems like Cohen Eccles has been the more prominent guy, but moving him out, maybe putting somebody else in that's fresh, letting Carius Kern continue to play out, at left tackle. Like those are the things that I need to continue to see because at this point, We don't need to see any more DJ Chester. We don't need to see any more Weston Davis. We know what we have with them, and it's not very good. We just need to continue to try whatever we can to win. Because at this point, you just are not a great offensive football team, and you just got to go out there and try. I think you need to tighten up the receiving rotation. Like I said, I think you need to kind of just go with a two-back system with Barry and Durham. Just rely upon the guys that you know have got some talent and just kind of ride it out. See what you got. But offensively, Saturday night, they just continue to show why they are just so bad. They cannot execute consistently at a good enough level right now to be very competitive against the really, really good teams. Now they've been able to put up points against like the bad teams of the SEC, but they just haven't been able to do it against the teams that are really, really good defensively. And unfortunately, the thing is this Alabama defense was gettable. They were not bad. They're not a bad defense, but there are times where they are gettable, and there were times in this game where they were gettable. You just didn't execute, and that's what's the hardest thing to kind of take in. Now, of course, along with the offense, of course, the conversation we all are having right now is about Garrett Nussmeier. And, Nuss, going into the year, I really did have high hopes that Nussmeier would have another solid season. I don't know if I necessarily was all on board for the Heisman Trophy odds conversation like so many other people were, just because I feel like there's an element to it where he's not mobile. So he would really have to have had like a phenomenal passing season to, really take home the Heisman. Like it just felt like it was going to be a really uphill battle for him. So I never really bought into that conversation. But I hoped he could replicate a little bit of what he did last year, cut down on some of the turnovers, still have 4,000 yards passing, maybe get a few more passing touchdowns, and have a better year. And obviously, whether it's been health, offensive line, whatever, obviously Garrett Nussmeier has just been very, very bad this year. And look, his stat line is not going to look bad. 18 of 21 for 121 is not going to look bad on a piece of paper. But where it gets bad is when you look a little bit deeper. And what I mean by that is you actually go and you watch the field and not just look at the stats. Because here's the thing, stats can lie. They can absolutely lie. Just because your box score is really, really good does not mean you went out there and had a good game. And if you watch that ball game on Saturday night, you know that Garrett Nussmeier did not have a good game. Most of those completions were on those terrible screens, and they went for nothing. He completely blanked on a wide open Xavier Thomas. He sat back there. He actually had some time in the pocket, and he just completely did not see a wide open Xavier Thomas, which, by the way, I think he did look over there, but yet for some reason he didn't pull the trigger on it. And then, of course, I think the play that really sealed it for him was you drop back. You are going up against a three-man rush. And look, LSU's offensive line has struggled with three-man rushes, unfortunately. So I understand that it can be a little bit weary sometimes for you when your offensive line cannot protect even against a three-man rush. But they actually did a pretty good job on this one. And even though Carius Kern was kind of getting the bulk of the pass rush with one guy, and he was, having to battle him a little bit, he was still doing a pretty good job. But instead of doing the most obvious thing where even the TV announcers are drawing like, hey, this is what you should have done, which is step up into the pocket, which was actually pretty clean, and try to just at least make a dump off pass or something, you try to spin. How do I describe it? It's like you spin the opposite direction, trying to go back to the left. You were kind of drifting to the right, kind of do this complete spin to try to get to the left side, and you turn right into the defender. Now, Garrett doesn't know the defender's right there because it's on his blind side. But still, like, why would you spin in that instance not knowing what's over there? Whether or not you think the guy's right there or not, you should never spin in that instance. You should always be looking to step up in the pocket, never backwards. And right after that was kind of the moment for me that kind of solidified he needed to be benched. Maybe not for the rest of the season before that game. Because Coach Wilson was on the sideline absolutely laying into him. I mean, absolutely laying into him. And I don't know what the reaction was too far after the clip, but like Garrett was not even like looking at him. And maybe look, it's awkward sometimes to look at somebody when they're yelling at you. I get it. But also when it's a coach, when it's somebody you know that is not just yelling at you for the sake of yelling at you, but trying to make you better, I feel like that's a little bit different. Garrett just kind of was staring off into space. And even once Frank was done, just kind of just like looked like a bump on a log. Like he just wasn't even really caring that he was getting laid into. And that's when I was like, you know what? Bench him. It doesn't look like he wants to be there right now. Put Michael Van Buren and just try something. I don't know what happened to Nussmeier. From the guy we saw last year that was slinging the rock, maybe sometimes a little bit overconfident in himself, would make some gunslinger type mistakes. How we went from that to what we have now. A guy that's scared to pull the trigger on a wide open Xavier Thomas a little bit down the field. A guy that's just like broken almost from being able to make logical decisions. I don't know if it's something mental that's off with him. Like there's just something that is just off mentally for him right now. I don't know if it's something physically off right now for him, like if he's still hurt with a knee thing or the torso injury or whatever. I don't know if it's just like he's got the spooks because he's been under duress all year. This offensive line is by far the worst offensive line I think I have ever seen, maybe in my lifetime of watching LSU football for like almost 20 years. Like, I don't know. I really can't tell you, but all I know is this. This was a terrible thing for this has been a terrible season for Nussmeier. This was a terrible game for Nussmeier, even if the stats don't necessarily reflect that. And the problem is I don't know how you can continue to roll him out there after this. Frank Wilson did say in his Monday press conference, like, hey, we're going to probably still roll with both of them. And I get, like, he's a senior. He's wearing number 18. It might be embarrassing to bench him. But at this point, man, I just think you have to go with Van Buren. I know Van Buren didn't light the world on fire with his stats. But again, I don't think the box score always reflects the game. Was it pretty? No, it was not pretty. But you saw flashes of what could be with more consistent reps, with more time to get kind of some chemistry going with the guys on the field. Like the run that he had that was close to the first down, a lot of people were mad about that. I thought even when the play happened, I was like, oh shoot, he might have slid a little too early. I thought that. And then I was like, well, maybe they're going to give it to him. And then they reviewed it and I said, oh, it's coming back. I kind of called that one before it even happened. But still, that was a play that like Van Buren's the only one making that play. Nussmeier's not making that play. His arm is a little bit in need of some refinement for sure. The accuracy was kind of all over the board. I mean, guys were having to make diving catches, trying to catch it low, trying to dive out because it was way too far in front. Like, still some things, obviously, he's got to fine tune with his arm. But again, I think just overall, the thing about Van Buren is he just adds an element to this offense that Nussmeier just doesn't have. And I think too for Van Buren, the nice thing is like really the expectations that kind of Garrett carried into the season this year were not placed on Van Buren. He wasn't expected to be a Heisman Trophy winner. He wasn't expected to be kind of the big time leader of this offense. wearing number 18, a historical number for LSU football. Like, the nice thing for Van Buren is he's kind of just a dude on this football team as the backup quarterback with some SEC starting experience and did a pretty good job at Mississippi State, all things considered. So, like, yeah, I get that, Garrett has maybe got the better arm of the two. I get that Garrett is the more experienced player by far and probably has a lot better the the better numbers across the board for the both of them, but there's just something at this point internally that is off with Nussmeier, and I just can't see them rolling forward with him moving through the rest of the season. And I hate to say that because as a guy, as a person, I like Garrett Nussmeier. I respect the fact that he has stuck around at LSU as long as he has. In this day and age, in this era, that is very, very uncommon for somebody to stick around, no matter what talent level they are at, for the amount of time that he has. But just something happened, and again, we'll never really know. But you just can't keep rolling forward with him at this point anymore. Van Buren needs to be your starter moving forward because, what if he does come back next year? What if Van Buren doesn't transfer out at the end of the year? He decides, hey, I want to come back to Baton Rouge in the fall with the new coaching staff and all that stuff. Could be nice to know, hey, you had a guy that went out there, finished the last couple games for you and did pretty well. At least you're not having as many question marks going into the year as you could if Van Buren transfers out and you got to bring in some new guys from the portal or whatever. So yeah, I mean, it's just been a difficult year for I think this whole team, but in particular, I think it's been just a devastating year for Garrett Nussmeier. And at this point, I think you just need to protect him from honestly just how hard this season has been. I get it. He's a football player. He's a grown person. Like, maybe he just needs to get over it, is what probably many of you are saying. Like, well, where the money he's getting paid, he should just get over it and move on. And I get that. I can see that. But at the same time, it's like, also just don't let him keep going out there and getting ridiculed every single play. Just let him ride the bench. And I know it sucks. He'd be like the first 18, I think, to ever get benched. But at this point, it's just not there and it's just not clicking. So I'm a Van Buren pusher now for the rest of the year. And yeah, so that's, I think, offensively, the whole conversation you have is just, again, it was abysmal. It's terrible. I mean, you missed a field goal from point blank range. I mean, that part of the night didn't even go well for you. So yeah, just a very, very rough night for LSU. Very, very tough night offensively for LSU, but it was not a rough night for this defense. I talked about in our preview episode, I felt like this Alabama offense matched up well with this LSU defense. And I think that came to light. You had a quarterback that, yes, could use his feet, but he was not necessarily like a Lenora Sellers, a definitely not a Marcel Reed type of runner or anything like that. He just is good at being able to basically get you some positive yards if something breaks down. He can escape the pocket if pressure, is coming down the middle and there's nobody picking up the block. He can kind of spin out of it, pick up 4 or 5 yards, get down, keep the drive alive. That's the kind of stuff Ty Simpson's good at. Not necessarily scrambling for like a 75-yard touchdown run at the drop of a hat because of how elusive he is or anything like that. So I felt like this was a good matchup for LSU. It's just, how did you hold up in the back end? And the problem is at the end of the day, that's what ended up kind of getting you the most. So when you look at Alabama's final stat line, it's not really, it's going to sound bad when I read it out here, but I'll explain why it's not like the worst that it could have been. So Ty Simpson ended up going 21 of 35 for 277 and a touchdown. And look, that's really great numbers. Like, there's no denying that. But offensively for Alabama, rushing wise, they only had 56 yards, and you held Jam Miller, one of the best running backs honestly, in the country, in my opinion, when he's hot, he only got 13 yards. Their leading rusher, Daniel Hill, only had 21, and he was the guy who also ran in the short touchdown run in the red zone. But even listen to these receiving numbers. So Jeremy Bernard had 79 yards, but on 3 receptions. Brooks, Lotzier Brooks, which I never even heard of him going into this game, and I know I've mentioned this a lot. I live in Tuscaloosa. I'm near this team all the time, and fans of this team. Lotzier Brooks has never been a name that has crossed my ears. So, but Lotzier Brooks had 4 for 67. Cuevas, the tight end, had 4 for 58. Another game where a tight end kind of got you a little bit. Ryan Williams, though, 3 for 33 and a touchdown, which hurt, but was the only receiving touchdown of the game. Isaiah Horton, 2 for 26. So, but here's the thing I wanted to say with this. While, yes, those are good numbers, and Ty Simpson, of course, I mean, listen, he's just playing on another planet at this point, quarterback wise, had a good night. When you look at these receivers, though, like Jeremy Bernard, like I said, 3 for 79, but his long was a 33. Like he had a really deep bomb for 33 yards. Lotzier Brooks had 67 yards. 53 of them was on one reception on a deep shot that Ty Simpson was just able to complete. Cuevas had 58. His long was 32. So that's why I'm saying some of this doesn't seem as bad in hindsight, because you realize, oh, Simpson was able to connect with them on a couple of just absolute bombs, and that's how they got those those receiving yards, those passing yards. And so, like, yes, it wasn't like you were just getting picked apart all game, but you gave them some explosive plays, and that's what kind of ended up breaking your back a little bit, so to speak, was the fact that that happened to you. Because here's the other thing. Alabama scored 14 points in the second quarter, 3 in the first. They didn't score at all in the third, and they only scored 3 points in the fourth quarter. So at one point, this was a 17-9 ball game. Like, not super far out of reach. It didn't even stretch into that big of a lead until they hit their field goal with 4:25 left in the fourth quarter. So up until almost the very end, this defense really did do a good job with a very high-powered passing attack. Because here's the thing, Alabama's not very good running the ball, and I'm going to talk about Alabama in just a second. But passing the ball, again, it's all about, can they complete these deep passes sometimes? And that's the thing. They were able to do that on Saturday night, and that's kind of what helped propel them forward a little bit. They're still a good team. Like, I'm not trying to discredit their offense. It's just, Ty Simpson, when he's hot, that's what's keeping them in a lot of these ball games. And, you know, and I think, this was just a night where he was able to be just hot enough to where it kept LSU, in a troublesome situation. But this defense really did put up one heck of a fight. I mean, Harold Perkins had an awesome play with a strip fumble, where he also recovered it. Like, that was amazing. Like I said, run defense all night was incredible. Honestly, your Mansour Delane, I don't even know if I saw him in the picture a lot of the times. Like, he was awesome. AJ Halsey was awesome. It just stunk because PJ Woodland, who's been playing so well for you all year, was kind of the guy that gave up a lot of those big plays. He got cooked on a couple of those. You also had Devon Keys was the one that was in coverage on Cuevas on that long reception. Keys should never have been in coverage on that play. It's just one of those things of, you just had an unfortunate night where one of your best corners had a bad game, and he got caught on a couple times for some deep passes and a pass interference that was pretty costly. And that happens sometimes. It's just unfortunate your offense wasn't able to back you up to help you out when one of your guys has a night like that. But all in all, without Whit Weeks, nobody gave LSU this much of a shot, I felt like. to even hold them to 20. And the fact that you were actually held them to 17 until about 4 minutes left in the ball game says a lot about this defense, the fight that they have, and just what Blake Baker is cooking up, even right now in a season like this. So, big fan of what the LSU defense did on Saturday night, but that's about as far as we can go with the positives. It was just a brutal night in Tuscaloosa on Saturday. And unfortunately, you know, you don't really have a whole lot left to really look forward to the rest of the year. You'll definitely get bowl eligible because you should beat Western Kentucky in a couple weeks. But Arkansas, features Taylon Green, a really good mobile quarterback. Now, you did hold them in check last year with a worse defense. And maybe you can pull that one out at home at 11:45 this upcoming Saturday. But at the same time, just I don't know. I don't know if you beat Taylon Green. Now, of course, Taylon Green may be out. I don't know. I got to check. He was hurt at the end of their last game, so not sure where he's at health wise. But if he plays, he's dangerous and might not be good for even a bad Arkansas team. If Taylon Green's playing, it could give them a little bit of a spark. So maybe you beat Arkansas. You should beat Western Kentucky, but the problem is really the ceiling you've got left is probably 6 or 7 wins because I don't know if you go on the road at this point and beat Oklahoma unless you just catch Oklahoma sleeping at home at the end of the year. I just don't know how you win that ball game. So you're talking about a 6, maybe a 7 win team at the end of the year. I don't want to be super negative. I mean, I don't. I picked them to go 10-2 at the beginning of the year, knocking on the door of the college football playoffs. So this is really disappointing for me to say this. But I just don't think you got much left to fight for at this point. But show up and show out if you're going to the next 2 home games, because those might be the last 2 wins you get this year. And try to show up for the boys because, again, what you can really look forward to the most is just the fact that somebody new is going to be coming here at some point here. We're another day closer, another week closer to a new coach coming in for LSU and hopefully reestablishing a better culture, a better, way for LSU. So you got that to look forward to. But as for the rest of the season, there's just not a whole lot to fight for other than just getting bowl eligible and maybe winning a bowl game, at least salvage the season a little bit. But all that being said, this was it was a brutal loss on Saturday just because you had a chance to win it, but it wasn't a surprising loss. Now, I do want to say one quick thing about Alabama because a lot of Alabama fans are out here talking trash, not necessarily the ones that I know. So I want to get that out of the way in case any of them are listening to this. It's not any of the people that I know that have been saying this kind of stuff, but on Twitter, on TikTok, they all been talking trash, saying, "Man, LSU's this bum program. Look at them. They thought they were going to come in here and do something on Saturday, and look, we beat them and all this stuff. You should have beat us. We are a 5-4 football team, and yet y'all honestly, you barely beat us. You barely beat us. You should have beaten this team like a drum, the way that they could not perform offensively, and you couldn't do it. You struggle to run the ball. You just do. Like I said, your leading rusher had 21 yards. 21. That's not good. It wasn't even your best running back. It was one of your backups. South Carolina took you to the brim. A South Carolina team that played LSU a few weeks before and got beat like what, 24-10 or something like that. I'm just saying, Alabama has not necessarily played great this year. They've just been able to find ways to win. And look, you have to do that to compete for championships and stuff like that. But all y'all talking like you just been blowing everybody out of the water and just beating up on everybody this season. You're not. You need to come down a little bit off your high horse. Everybody's going, well, look at DeBoer now. Yeah, you lost 4 games last year with DeBoer. Like, let's all remember that, including a bowl game against a really bad Michigan team. Let's all remember that. Also remember you got manhandled by what's ended up being a pretty bad Florida State team at the beginning of the year. And I know teams are allowed to get better, so you gotten better. Congratulations. You beat Georgia. Congrats. But all I'm saying is this. If you think that y'all are something because you beat LSU on Saturday 20-9, then this really is a sad world that you are living in because you beat what's now a 5-4 football team by 11, and it didn't even get to 11 till you hit a last second field goal or a field goal with 4 minutes left. I just don't understand where all this pride and cockiness and attitude really comes from. Because here's the other thing I want to say: enjoy it now. Enjoy it now. Because the truth is, a lot of this roster is still a lot of Saban players. Ty Simpson, Jam Miller, Caden Proctor. Like a lot of these guys on this roster, Tim Keenan the third, I think LT Overton. Saban recruited guys, Saban brought in guys, guys that were here at the end of the Saban era. Guess what? Les Miles had a lot of success in his first couple of years too after Saban left LSU, using Saban players. And then he had a pretty good run of his own, yeah, for a couple of years, and then it kind of fell off the wagon there towards the end. Just wait till it's all DeBoer guys, and you'll see. Maybe it's not all sunshine and rainbows. I think DeBoer's a really good coach. Think he'll do good, but it's not going to be at this elite level that you have been accustomed to. And I think that's the thing you have not realized yet as Alabama fans is like this awesome pedigree that you have been at, the standard of college football for so long. That window, I mean, it's shutting very, very quickly. But you're still so caught up in what Saban did and the past and all these things that you're still talking smack. And it's like, man, when that window finally shuts, y'all are going to be really sad. You're going to be really sad. And I'll eat crow if it never happens. The board could win the next 10 against LSU. I'll shut my mouth. But I just think it's a very dangerous game you're playing right now, running your mouth when you're really not like this elite team. You're just a really good team this year, and you're still using a lot of Saban guys. So I'll just throw that out there. But there was a lot of other stuff that happened in week 11 of college football, though, and I'm going to real quickly run through that as we wrap up. Section went a little long, so I'll try to go fast through just the college football recap. First and foremost, man, holy smokes, that Indiana Penn State game may have been one of the most fun games to watch all day. Whew, Indiana getting that last second touchdown in, winning 27-24. Holy smokes, that was a great game. Texas Tech absolutely beats up on BYU. I mean, even a worse whipping than I think most people expected. And listen, I'm not saying Texas Tech is like the best team in the country or anything, but Texas Tech is in an interesting position because they can go out there and win the Big 12 and make the college football playoff, and they could be a problem for several teams. So we'll just have to see how their season continues to go. Oregon escapes Iowa in just a nasty day, by the way. Holy smokes. I mean, just raining and just gross. But they walk out with a 2-point win, 18-16, which was good for them. Of course, California was able to pull off the upset over Louisville. Wake Forest got the upset over Virginia. The ACC is just going crazy right now. It's going to be wild to see how that all shakes out because Miami bounced back too with a 38-10 win. Like, wow, the season just this college football is just crazy, man. And then Vanderbilt found themselves in a tight one with Auburn, a really bad team that just replaced their coach. And in an overtime game was able to escape 45-38. And really the only other team that I kind of kept my eye on, well, outside of Mississippi State, I watched a little bit of that game before it got ugly. But man, Florida, another team that just recently switched out their coach, went on the road and got absolutely, I mean, obliterated by Kentucky to the point where they benched DJ Lagway. So another quarterback that heading into the year had a lot of high expectations put on him. And man, just a bad week to be a starting quarterback that had, big expectations, I guess, in the SEC because Lagway got benched. And look, it's just been a bad year for Florida as well. So week 11 was definitely crazy, and we'll have to see how week 12 all turns out. Of course, LSU will be preparing for Arkansas. We will be talking about that game later in the week, previewing it. We'll also make sure to talk about any hoops action that comes about. Of course, LSU's women's team, holy smokes, laid the absolute force down on Southeast Louisiana the other night. Should not be a surprise, but man, they really got a big win there, and then they've continued to win in some impressive fashions over the last couple of games. And as you know, that season keeps going along. We'll talk about that as men's hoops keeps going. We'll make sure to highlight them as well. But for now, this is where I'm going to end it at. So thank you guys so much for following along. Hey, make sure to like, share, subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. Also, make sure to hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. And until next time, I hope you guys have a great week, and let's go Tigers.